Let me also now introduce our guest joining us this evening. We have Member of Parliament from the BJP, Anurag Sharma. We'll shortly be joined by Member of Parliament from the TMC, Dr. Shantanu Sen. We also have spokesperson of the Congress Party, Adil Singh Boparai. And we also have senior editor of the Swaraj magazine, Tushar Gupta. Good to have all of you on the broadcast with us. Anurag Sharma, let me begin with you first, because the opposition parties are all up in arms today, and then it's not just the Congress. It's the AIMM, it's the TMC. Every party that you name it today has an issue as far as this unparliamentary list is concerned. The opposition is seeing this as a diktat. Also, look at some of the words that are part of this list. Words like corrupt, words like drama, hypocrisy. These are words that we use in our common conversation every single day. So the opposition is asking, why have they been banned?
Look, I don't think so any word is as such being banned. The list which comes out, it says these words are going to be expunged. One, and if you heard the Lok Sabha speaker, I've just heard his new press conference, where he's been very categorical. He said, look, if a member uses a certain word, no action will be taken against him. But it's the context the word is used in, and this list has come out every year since 1999, virtually. And I think we just need to up the parliamentary debate. A lot of times we are just hurling abuses, or even in the various Vidhan Sabhas across the country. What kind of impression are you really giving to the people? So if words are being expunged later, they're also expunged with the members' knowledge. So if I've said something unparliamentary in, let's say, during one of my debates in Parliament, then if I've said something unparliamentary, someone has an objection, or the speaker himself has an objection, I get the part of the speech back to me and say these are the words being removed, or this word was said in this context. So if I have an objection, I can go back to the Lok Sabha speaker, to the honorable speaker, and explain my stance. So if my stance is good enough, they will allow it. If it's not, it will be expunged. I really don't think there is a huge issue about this.
No, the problem actually is, and the voice that is being raised by most of the opposition parties is that there is a very selective choosing of these words, because most of these words are used for criticizing the government. So the government has basically done away with most of the words which are used for criticism.
Look, it's not the word per se. Let's be very clear. It's not the word per se. It is the context. It is the context you use the word. So if it is derogatory to any member, and it's not that it's just the opposition which uses it. I think a lot of us from the treasury benches also tend to use these words, and they're used. I mean, some really bad words are used in some of the Vidhan Sabhas. I've seen some of those speeches. I've heard some of those debates. You can't even use those on national TV.
Adil, let me bring you in. What is the problem if we're trying to bring a sense of sanity as far as the parliament language is concerned? I agree with what Anurag Sharma is saying, that some of the times you feel actually embarrassed listening to the language that is being used by elected representatives. And more importantly, this isn't the first time that this has been done. Every year a similar list comes out. So why is the opposition up in arms today?
Well, good evening, Ridhima, and thank you for having me on your program. Point number one, if the objective is to curtail hate, then I think the biggest purveyor of hate in this country is the BJP, number one. Number two, I think it is important that when you, as public speakers, when we make speeches, it is the context which has to be seen. I would partially agree with Mr. Sharma, who's an erudite individual, and I'm quite pleasantly surprised that he's not like his colleagues. They basically, when you're making speeches, you have to see the context, you have to see the larger issue which is being discussed. For example, you often put questions, or you often make speeches in a rhetorical fashion to drive home a point. You often use satire for your speeches. So I think the context has to certainly be seen when you're making these speeches. Number three, what we've consistently noticed, and this is verifiable from independent record, that since the BJP has come to power, the average number of days on which the parliament has sat has consistently reduced. Similarly, the concept of standing committees was started in the early 1990s, where it was thought that it is important that bills are sent to a chamber to be discussed dispassionately and threadbare. We are noticing that the number of bills which are sent to the standing committees has also significantly diminished. Now, coming to my larger point, Ridhima, and perhaps you may concur with me on this, that parliamentary discussions are the lifeblood of any democracy. It is important, regardless of where we stand on the political aisle, that there has to be a healthy exchange of views and ideas. So therefore, I think it is incumbent on the ruling dispensation to encourage deliberations, encourage dissent, because that would also reduce or lessen street protest. After all, in a parliamentary democracy, the concern or the appropriate chamber to discuss issues threadbare is the parliament. So therefore, instead
Adil,
of
I understand the point that you're
speech,
making, but hear me out. Adil, hear me
speech.
out. The point that you're making, agreed. But the reason that I'm trying to understand is, one, this list comes out, every single year. And look at some of the examples that I'll give you. A word like lollipop was expunged in the budget from the Punjab Assembly as far as the previous government is concerned. You've reached here telling a lie was again expunged from the Punjab Assembly. So it's a common practice. And as I pointed out, not just in India, but internationally as well.
Ridhima, I again come back to my preliminary point. Words have to be seen in a certain context. When you're making a speech, for example, let's take the example of Jumla. What is Jumla? Jumla is a false promise. When the current dispensation and its highest echelons promise 15 lakh rupees, they admit and candidly admit that that was a Jumla. So are we remiss in saying that you had given a Jumla to the people of this country that you'll transfer 15 lakh rupees into the account? So therefore, the context has to be seen. But coming to the larger point, I think it's in the interest of democracy that free, fair and healthy discussions are encouraged. The parliament sits for a longer period of time, what was envisaged by our constitution makers, and more number of bills are sent to standing committees so that erudite individuals like Mr. Sharma can discuss that threadbare and come out with the final bill which is in the best interest of our country.
Okay. Member of Parliament from the TMC, Dr. Shantanu Sen, is also now joining us. Good to have you on the broadcast with us. While I'm trying to understand what is the larger issue here, as I gave you examples when I started the show, that not just in India, it happens in India also every year, internationally also it's a common practice. There is also a sense today that is this the only issue that the opposition today wants to focus on? I would like to believe that there are other issues that the opposition would want to focus their energy on. Inflation, economy and other things. Is a list really at the top of the priority as far as the opposition is concerned?
See, there are several issues and the entire country is burning inside and outside. And it is clear to each and every one. And that's why this BJP is very much scared and apprehensive, knowing fully well that the oppositions are going to burst. They are going to be in a furious mood in the coming monsoon session. That's why they have done this. Let me cite you some example. In 8 years, Narendra Modi ji never faced a single question asked by any media person. In last 7 years, Narendra Modi ji never came to Rajya Sabha to answer a single question. Earlier, at least 7 out of 10 bills used to be scrutinized. Now hardly 1 out of 10 bills is getting scrutinized. In last monsoon session, when I was suspended in an unparliamentary way, 28 to 29 bills were literally passed by bulldozing. Hardly few bills are sent to the select committees or standing committees for their opinion. Just remember the voting pattern and voting issue of this farmers bill. How they forcefully bulldozed. The issue is they are totally believing in the unilateralism. You remember few years back there was a censorship on Parliament, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha TV, so that the voice of the opposition can't be heard by the people at large across the country. So basically Parliament is the parliamentary floor is for the opposition. That is the basic essence of parliamentary democracy. And this BJP rule government, they are ruining each and every institution. They are throttling the voice of the opposition.
Okay. While I'll take the larger issue
One second, madam. Speaking the truth is unparliamentary because this government is lying to the people. And if you say so, then you are using unparliamentary word. That means
okay. So fair enough. So I understand your point. While I agree with the idea that yes, the opposition in a democracy should have a fair opportunity and a fair platform to raise their voices, but I'm still trying to understand that if we're only trying to streamline the entire process or make it a little more sane, what really is the issue, Tushar? If we're just trying to make it a little more courteous, because as I said, these are elected representatives and sometimes you're really ashamed to listen to the language that transpires between different parliamentarians. What is the issue if we are trying to make it a little more sane?
Absolutely, Ridhima. You asked a very important question that does the opposition not have other issues to focus on? Inflation, economy, reforms. What is the agenda of the government for the next 2 years? What is the agenda of this regime for the next 8 years? They don't ask any of these questions. Every morning I wake up and I wonder what's the next absurdity around which the opposition will base its entire protest for the day. Yesterday, it was about the Lions looking too aggressive. Today, it's about 2-3 words which they have cherry-picked that are not being allowed in the parliament. They won't talk about the scores of words which have been taken on the list because they actually diluted the quality of the conversation within the parliament. Every time BJP takes one step, a very, irrelevant step in the larger scheme of things, which is the opposition just wants to come down and protest. Blindly, mindlessly. Why can't they worry about getting to the Lok Sabha in the first place in the 2024 elections? At the rate which TMC and Congress are going right now, they shouldn't worry about the words being put on the expunge list. Rather, they should be worried if they will have enough MPs in 2024. But this is nothing about, protesting the freedom of speech or that the opposition's voice are being stifled. Nothing about that. It's just about making the quality of the conversation in the parliament a little more courteous, a little more intelligent, a little more polite, which is what has been missing for the last 8 years. And the opposition has a problem in it.
Adil, respond to what Tushar is saying, and this is essentially what I was trying to understand. Are these misplaced priorities of the opposition? 2 days ago, we had issues as far as the design or the teeth or the entire, I don't know, whatnot, as far as the emblem is concerned. And today it's about words included in the list. Shouldn't we be talking about more constructive issues?
Well, Ridhima, in lighter vein, we were indeed having a very intelligent discussion till Mr. Gupta started, and he appears to be more BJP than even the BJP MP. But having said this, we are always raising issues which affect the common man. For example, the plummeting rupee vis-a-vis the dollar. It's the media which is discussing this. Had you called me for the mismanaged economy, we would have addressed. But unfortunately, the media tries to have debates and debates on issues which tend to brush the real issues under the carpet.
That's unfair, Adil. Your opposition parties like yours have been up in arms all through the day, wanting either the list to go away or to be put on hold. So that's why I'm asking, why are your party members being so busy as far as the list is concerned?
You must allow me to respond to this. For example, yesterday and today, our spokespersons from 24 Upper Road have been holding press conferences on price rise. How many channels are holding a discussion on price rise? I put to you. You want to cherry pick issues which somehow give the BJP, and I'm not talking about you, Ridhima. I hold you in very high regard, and you're a very independent anchor.
Okay, I think we seem to
discussion on price rise, on the plummeting rupee vis-a-vis the dollar, and have proxies like Mr. Gupta who are more BJP than the RSS.
Okay,
I'm more nationalist than the Congress, Ridhima. That's all. Mr. Adil may think I'm more BJP than the BJP, but the truth is I'm more nationalist, more patriotic than the Congress. You may mock my sensibilities, Mr. Adil, but it's not my party that is in tatters. It's not my party that is losing state after state. It's not my party that is a third wheel in a coalition which has fallen apart. So you might take the pot shots on me, I don't mind. But it's your party which stages a walkout every time there is a discussion in the parliament. It's your party which wants to do a dharna on every reform that is introduced. It's your party which risks having MPs in single digits in 2024. So by all means, have your fun. Mock me.
Okay.
I think let's give him that credit.
Let me
take that up with the BJP. Take that up with the BJP, Mr. Adil.
I have no difficulty in debating with him, but he must candidly come out and say, I am BJP.
Okay, we seem to be deviating from the issue, and Anurag Sharma, I want to come to you.
When you get proxies like this, they are inclined to have an unintelligent conversation.
Okay.
Mr. Sharma and
Mr. Adil, not my problem.
Okay.
Mr. Adil, not my problem.
Okay, Tushar and Adil, one second. We have other panelists on the show as well. Let's have a fair share of respect for them as well. One sec, Tushar and Adil, I will come back to both of you. Anurag Sharma, let me come to you as far as the larger issue is concerned. And the sentiment today within the opposition is that every mean is now being adopted to try and stifle their voices. Like the example that Adil was giving, essentially saying that we've seen in the past also there have been certain proceedings, or I think Dr. Shantanu Sen was pointing out that certain proceedings have been blacked out. There has been a fair share of parliamentarians who've been expelled from the proceedings. And today, as I pointed out, they feel that there has been a very selective compilation of this entire list. And the reason that I'm saying is that an example that has been given, that you have Jumla GV as part of this new list, but words like Andolan GV, which has been used by the Prime Minister in the past, actually don't see a mention. So they're trying to understand why.
Okay, Ridhima, firstly, I mean, with all due respect to Adil ji and Mr. Gupta and, of course, my colleague Shantanu ji, let me be very clear on a couple of things. One, you can use these words in Parliament. It's just dependent on the context you use them. Secondly, there is something called a business advisory committee in the Parliament, where every bill is decided and the time is allotted to that particular bill. All the opposition, including parties which have one single MP, sit in this committee. They decide the time frame. And the time frame, and I'm really happy to note this, and you can please check this on your records, and Mr. Sen will also agree with me on this, that every time a time is allotted,
okay,
the Lok Sabha Speaker has been more than kind to give the opposition much higher time to discuss each and every bill threadbare. And this has happened constantly in the past, including what he just said on the Farmers' Bill.
Okay.
On the Farmers' Bill, people with one single seat got much more time than some of us MPs on the BJP, on the Treasury bench did. Most of them got enough time to discuss these bills threadbare.
Okay.
Now, the other issue is being said is that you cannot use unparliamentary language. You cannot, and there are a couple of conventions. If there is someone in the house, we may take his name. If there's someone not in the house,
sure,
you should not accuse him of something.
Okay, so the larger reason
and
behind this list is to
this.
try and make this a more sane discussion and to have the opposition also to have a fair chance, but in a more parliamentary fashion. Unfortunately, I will have to leave the conversation there. Adil, Anurag Sharma, Shantanu Sen and Tushar, it was a pleasure speaking with all of you. We're shifting our focus to some breaking developments now. Now, the Muslim cleric from Ajmer